Hey, everybody. Tiffany D Jackson is in here chilling with me today. The D stands for delightful. She is wonderful. And we're going to have a conversation today about something that is very close to my heart, certainly, and obviously close to Tiffany's heart because she's written an entire book about it. And it's about the maturing of Black girls and how it is forced on them. So, when I was reading Grown Tiffany, which by the way, I consumed in one night, like I literally started reading it and looked up, it was 3 o'clock in the morning and I
Oh
was
my
finished.
God.
And my husband probably was like, could you please turn off the light? I didn't even, have the politeness to go downstairs. I just stayed in bed reading it
So
all
I
night.
just say,
But one of the things that struck me about sort of the levels or the different degrees of this conversation and where it can go. So you started right off the rip saying, that this book is about the abuse of power. And when I look at my own book, specifically, I'll reference So Done mostly today, but I think there's the abuse of power. And then there's what I'm calling kind of the burdening a child with maturity.
mm,
And then there's kind of the subtle references to our girls' bodies and how that has that impact. But, you know, I take it that you have some personal experience with this. So, whatever you're comfortable sharing in terms of what really led to you being able to talk about this.
um, wow, yeah. I feel that, it's not even personal experience for me, because I feel like I know so many people who've gone, so many other women who have gone through the same thing. And it's really taken a lot of, in the last, like over the last like decade, I'll say, to kind of unpack this concept of why we were sort of raised so differently
Yeah.
than everyone else around us,
Yes.
like it wasn't even just like white children or Latin children or anything like that. It just feels like we were just raised with a different set of standards.
Yes. And we're sort of expected early on to have this worldliness about us almost.
Right. And I think when I start to kind of look at it from more contextualize it, quite frankly, I I sort of try to give some compassion and grace to, our grandmothers and aunties and, so and so who told us like, oh, make sure you're not alone with a man at a certain hour and
Yeah.
stuff like that, because it wasn't rooted so much in criticism or feeling that we are inherently bad. I think it was rooted more in survival.
Yes.
Um,
Knowing
especially,
better. They knew.
yes, yes. And they also, I think it was survival and also protection in a lot of ways, because I think they realized that we as Black women don't typically get justice.
Yeah. And what's funny is like I agree because I can, remember not even, honestly, not even for me with just my aunties and my grandmother and my mom, even like the men in my life knew and would do things to protect. Like my grandfather, and then my husband ended up being the same way, and so was my dad. My grandfather was the type of person where if you were, no matter how familiar you were with the women in his family, you were not going to come to his house when he wasn't home. There was no man that was going to just stop past and,
Right.
oh, I'll wait for him here or whatever. If he wasn't home, you weren't staying there. And my father was the same way. And my husband is the same way. And like you said, it's about protection. It's about knowing that if given a
Right.
chance, some people are going to try it.
And it's almost like protecting you from that injustice as well, from the pain of that injustice. Because in general, like we can scream from the mountaintops, like, hey, this happened to us. And
Yeah.
not many people are going to believe us. So, even though, yeah, there were times where I was told, like, I can't walk down the street by myself at night, even though I see all my cousins out there by themselves. I'm like, but wait.
Right.
The constant fear of being kidnapped, like sort of drilled in my head, especially when I was in like Jamaica. That was a chronic thing that people were like so worried about. Like I spent most of the time just inside the house. And so I
Wow.
think I think that's also the idea that they know more than I do, and they're not trying to be like per se jerks about it. And I think that that's something that, you know, I hope that we could sort of inspire with our work to girls now, is to know like where this is somewhat coming from, that this is not a reflection of them and who they are in their souls, but more sort of the trauma that happens within like history, right? Because, you know, the way, I mean, just the root of even systemic racism is embedded into some of these like things that we're doing today, like what we kind of like tell girls about themselves today. So I think that, I guess that's where I'm sort of thinking of. And I think about like, you know, like your stories, particularly because you're dealing with like grown really deals more with, you know, that teenage year, that right, like at the cusp of like, you know, adulthood. Yes, but I feel like yours is at like that very precipice moment where you sort of really find out more or less about the world, which I guess that's like the definition of middle grade, right? I just totally spilled that out, but
light bulb.
I'm like, oh, now I get it.
And you know what? That's exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because we're capturing two different moments of the spectrum, really. And I think like one of the things that sort of fascinates me is that when you know, think about those moments that I said where I think sometimes we burden a child with maturity, and I don't mean, you know, any disrespect, because I agree with you. It's not that anybody did anything wrong, because this is about protectiveness. But I know personally, I found that, for example, my youngest daughter is 16, but she's always been, you know, no other word to use it, she's always been a very mature child. She's 10 years younger than her older sister. And so, you know, for her, there were only ever adults or parental figures in the house. So she's mature, she's, you know, very independent, she's very opinionated. And I would find myself mentioning this, oh, she's mature, she's independent. And I would have to remind myself, but wait, she is still a child. And I would have to pull back on, making sure that she didn't feel like she had to make these decisions by herself, or that she had to, you know, kind of buck up and do things because we had already told everybody how mature she was, you know, and that's that kind of, I guess, thin line that you walk, because you can't help maturing them in a certain way, because we got to prepare them for this world.
Word. Like, but I as someone who was a teenager who was very much like Enchanted, obviously, and based a lot of the things that happened in Enchanted on some things that happened to me as well too. Mm-hmm. You know, me and my brother are 14 years apart. I'm not
okay, sure. So you know.
So I was basically like the teen mom in high school. Like I was the only girl in high school with a car seat. And so like I had the responsibility of like taking care of a child, and sort of like, you know, half raising a child. But yet when I wanted to do things like, and wild things too, like drive to a concert, like, you know, way out like Long Island and stuff like that, my parents weren't down for that. And I'm like, well, wait, like, so from a child's perspective, from a kid's perspective, especially in that 16, 17-year-old, it's kind of confusing, because you're expected to be mature enough to do all these things, to know better about all these different, you know, things that are going on in your life, but yet you can't actually be an adult. Like you're not still considered an adult.
And that's really valid. And that's what I mean. Like it's actually a really tough dance, because you are doing both. You are having it both ways. And I can honestly say that I was very mindful of that with my oldest daughter. I would always make sure she had a childhood. Like there were times when she was in high school where we wanted a night out so bad. We would be like, oh my God, if we could just, you know, kind of get out and have a break. But I never wanted her to feel like she had to watch her sister instead of going to a football game, or, instead of, hanging out with friends. And so there were plenty of times when we reined that in. We made sure we actively did not, you know, I hate using words like burden, but we made sure we didn't task her with having to watch her sister all the time. But then, there were times obviously where it's like, well, look, you're the older sister. We need you to do this. And that's what it is.
We need you to step up. Yeah. And, looking back on it, now I understand. I think I was younger and I was just like, guys, like, but I fully understand now the pressures of being a parent, period.
Yeah.
And how much that entails. But when you're in the thick of it, you don't really know that much, right? So you don't really have like the scope of it. And I think that's what sort of the hope in like, books like ours and, these type of conversations, longer, larger conversations, quite frankly, that we discuss sort of, the balance there. But also really kind of drill in on the unfairness, if that's a word. Unfairness, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It is today.
It is today on this call. But it's just the undue pressure on Black girls to be like adults.
Yes.
And not even by our own doing. I think there was like a study on this about the adultification of Black girls and how people pretty much have these preconceived notions that young children, young Black girls, particularly are more adult-like than the white girls. So they know better. They're way more sassier. They should know all these answers and stuff like that. And not allowing them to have that same grace and childhood as a white child.
Absolutely. It's just facts. I mean, there are so many little things that lead to it as well. Like there's a part in Grown early where the swim coach says to Enchanted something about how her swimsuit fits her. And just tiny things like that. I don't know if adults, especially white adults, if I'm keeping it a stat, understand what those tiny messages say to our girls, because I know that with both of my girls, when they were in middle school, we had to have the conversation over and over again about how they would get dress coded for wearing the same type of outfit that their white peers wore because they happen to have hips or they happen to have, a round butt. And when my oldest daughter was in school, I was a different mother, right? Like I was 10 years younger, and I would be like, well, your skirt is a little short. But by the time I had my youngest daughter, I'm like, thought they call me. Let them call me. If they send you home, because I'm like, I will stand in this hallway and point out every other child. Like I just became, it's like the difference in it, because then I really kind of recognized how unbalanced it was. But those comments make a difference.
They do. They definitely because you start to question everything. And even when comments are made jokingly, I saw a couple of comments in Turning Point as well too, where people were kind of mentioning about weight, but kind of brushing under the rug with a joke. But jokes are sort of what do they say? Jokes are 70% truth. And
right. There's always some truth in a joke, for sure.
Yeah, something along those lines. And I think people grossly underestimate what kids are able to handle and what they're able to what they absorb.
Yes.
And we absorb all that. We absorb those type of little innuendos and messages and idiosyncrasies and stuff like that. We absorb all of that, and we go through it with it. I say we, I'm 12, but I'm far from that.
but we've been Black girls, so it is we.
Yes. I think also I still feel like a young Black girl, internally. I still have that teenager still stuck inside me that is still looking for all these answers.
Same.
And still sort of sussing out things as I go along. So I guess, maybe when I say we, I am looking at us too and say us teenagers,
Yeah. and there is, I mean, I've had people ask, oh, how do you get your language so authentic? Or how do you, oh, you must because you have kids, all of my books have been written when either my kids were younger than the age of the protagonist or or older. It has nothing to do with that. I agree. I think we still are in touch, if nothing else, with our teenage side. So again, we're trying to figure it out through their lens. Right. And the ability to do that is a gift. I mean, I take it as a gift because I want to be able to, make sure that young readers know that they're seen. But low-key, a lot of what I do is I'm trying to make sure adults understand, like I want them to read it and be like, oh, like, do I do that? Or, like I want them to think about it too.
Yes, I definitely feel like, people always sort of like, criticize like, oh, it's okay for a young adult novel and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. But, but I truly believe that adults should take the time to read, especially the young adult novels and middle grades are out right now. Because when we were growing up, we didn't have these type of books that answered the questions that we are still trying to understand to this day.
Yeah.
I think it's really fascinating how many, I'll be honest, I have way more adult readers than I do like young adults that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to kind of interact with those readers because I realize that, it's almost like light bulbs are going off everywhere. They're like, oh, I never noticed that, or I never did that. Or, oh my God, like I never even realized that I was saying things like this to my daughter. I had a reader who read Grown, the early edition of Grown, and was like, I do say to her, like, oh, make sure you listen to this man. Make sure you thank him for everything he's done and stuff like that. Like instead, like the little things like that where she catches herself.
I literally put a bookmark next to that part of Grown when I saw that, and I just thought, because we as the reader, we know what's happening, and obviously, her mother doesn't, but it's still, it packs a punch. It hits differently when you understand as the reader what's happening to her in that moment. To hear her say, make sure you listen to him, and you're thinking, no, don't listen to him.
Right. Right. I just think there are so many little things that we just intentionally do. And even I have been like guilty of it. When I was still working in television, I told my interns to do like the fingertip test.
Mm-hmm.
The test where like, you put your arms to the side. What you're wearing is longer than your middle fingers.
Yep.
And I did that mostly so that, other people wouldn't talk about them.
Yeah.
But now looking back on it, I realize kind of like how hypocritical that is, because even if other people did talk about them, that's their own business, but that shouldn't affect how you see them and their the quality they bring to their work.
But your point is valid. You were still also trying to protect, and I think that's what I came away from. After reading your book through the lens of us being ready to talk about it, that's what I thought about how much unintentional maybe damage we tend to inflict because of either trying to protect or trying to, develop a polite, a respectful human being to put that out in the world, because that's what it is too. Obviously as a parent, you want your kids to look like they had what we call home training. So God forbid, right? We don't have
right. Yeah. We all kind of have that, like that mindset, like, look like you were raised right.
Yep.
Yes. I definitely still have that mindset still stuck in my head. And, sometimes I even say like, not everybody was raised right. Not everyone learned like politeness and stuff like that.
Facts.
But there is definitely a difference between learning like politeness and, being taught to shrink yourself so you don't cause trouble.
Yeah. Yes.
And I feel like a lot of girls, particularly Black girls, have been taught to sort of shrink themselves so that they don't cause trouble, so that they're not hurt, so that, and it's like, it goes back to that whole like, expectations of Black girls that are not, given to other children. And so I think that's where I don't know. I look back on a lot of stuff now and kind of like see it's so totally different. And I'm glad for this, because that way, you move forward, you reach back. And so the hope is to kind of like go back and teach young girls like, hey, like, none of this, whatever possibly happened or whatever, like things that happen around, maybe let's say you did wear a short skirt and someone made a comment, like that's not your fault. Like you shouldn't be responsible for the actions of other people.
Exactly. And so with that said, you have a little treat for us, a little piece of the book that, like kind of reinforces what we're talking about here?
Yeah. So I actually have one sort of in the beginning chapters of Grown.
Yay. Coming at you, y'all.
I'll read this like first part. So this is like Enchanted and her parents are going to Corey's concert, and they're going to meet him. They're meeting him backstage. So I'll just read this little part. I won't take too long. After the show ends, we make our way to the backstage entrance, nearly swallowed by a crowd trying to finagle their way in. But they don't have badges like we do. We're VIP. An attendant waves us on. Guest of K's this way. We're led through a maze of hallways to a door with a sign that says green room, which really isn't green, but dressed in black curtains wrapped around the wall. Chilled champagne bottles and tray of hors d'oeuvres sit on the table, while white leather sofas cradle music stars. Oh, wow, Daddy whispers to Mom. Can you believe this? Oh my God, Mom says, slapping Daddy's arm. Terry, look. Don't look, but look. That's Usher. Celebrities spill in, all wearing the same badge. We're as important as the celebrities. This could be my green room someday, maybe someday soon. Enchanted, when Mr. Fields come back here, remember to thank him for the tickets. The thought of seeing him again, really seeing him, makes me bounce on the balls of my feet. It's dark back here. What if he doesn't see me? Chill, I tell myself. Gab won't act like this silly. She would be effortlessly cool. Need to draw from that power. Pull down your shirt, baby, Mom mumbles, yanking my top. Don't want these grown men looking at what you got. There's a flurry of activity before Corey steps inside, surrounded by a swarm of cameras, security, and women, gorgeous model types, the kind you see on Instagram with over 1 million followers and tight bodycon dresses, weaves down to their snatched waists. I step back, nauseous and ready to leave, when he spots me from across the room. Without hesitation, he charges right over, his swarm following. Madison Square falls silent.
And I wrote, when you were reading that, I wrote celebrity worship, and not like literally, but just sort of, where we are, that, even her parents are a little starstruck at the experience, being backstage. And, and it's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we all have artists, music, maybe visual, maybe authors who make us feel like, oh, they're such and such, or they make you feel some kind of way. So it's nothing wrong with it, but it's, of course, we know later on in the book that turns on them, and people question it and question their decisions. And I think that's the part that what I've come to a realization just in our short conversation is just how complex it actually all is, because it's so many things involved with where that ended up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely, yeah, wow. And I like, even hearing you say that, like about celebrity culture, how like that just kind of blinds you so much. And that's honestly how, particularly in like the R. Kelly incidents cases, that's actually how he got away with so much, was he was able to blind everyone with, his talent. So it hid his dark side so well.
And it emboldened him. Now, God forbid, I know we had to mention his name because, because the situation, but think of how much it emboldened him, because his lyrics were so overtly sexual, and it was right there in our face. In all of his music,
the whole time.
We didn't, it's just not something that you really put one and one together to make two early on.
I wanted to make a comment as well too, that how like Enchanted's here with her like two parents, and for the most part she comes from a very like suburban,
Mm-hmm.
atypical like type of childhood. What I loved about your stories is that there was a lot of rooted in like dance and also in church. Because I once got a very interesting comment at a Texas book festival who, someone just raised their hand in the middle of this huge panel, was like, hey, I really appreciate the fact that you put church in your book. And it was for Monday's Not Coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, thanks. And I was so thrown off by it that it didn't really occur to me that isn't a norm. And it's
Right.
and it's a bit of a norm in a lot of Black communities. Like,
Totally.
we're used to going to church every Sunday, and we have choir practice or Bible study and stuff like that. And people, I think honestly, people think that if you are so embedded in church that you can't make mistakes.
Yes. And even church people try to make you believe that that's the case too. And, and it's sort of the point, is to reflect all of us or every piece of us. And like you said, it's not a church book any more than
Right.
Grown is a music book.
Right.
It's like to have an element of something in it, but then to have that one piece taken out as if it were almost as if it were a deliberate hook, when it's not. It just happens to be that this is kind of part of a certain culture or a community, or a family.
Yes.
Yes.
Like that's exactly what it is. And so when I think of like, even like just thinking about like Turning Point and like the summer that she spent with her auntie, I'm kind of like, yeah, like this is normal stuff.
Totally.
But it also kind of like unfairly adds this like this another pressure, like, oh, well, you're in the church, so
Yes.
you shouldn't. Yes. So
I feel like we're touching on a lot of that subtle pressure. I mean, I don't even know if in Turning Point the pressure is that subtle. Her aunt is very strict and just kind of stuck in her beliefs about how one should act and that type of thing. But I have a piece of So Done I wanted to read that talks about kind of subtle pressure. Since this book is older and most people might already be familiar with it, the part that I wanted to pull out is about Tay and the relationship that she has with her father, which is very, very fragile and barely there. But we get this kind of friction with her grandmother, and the three of them interact. And so I'm going to read this little part. Nona's arm went around her, escorting her to the sofa so the three of them were huddled. I'm going to the Food and Wine Fest, baby girl. Nona's arms folded across her chest. Bryant, didn't I ask you to text Tay earlier this week so you would know what's on her schedule this morning? She shook her head, disgusted. Look, I won't be back until about 8 or 9. I don't want Tay out there running the streets. I thought you'd made plans, boy. Tay's mouth disappeared as she pressed her lips together to keep from saying anything. Her father planned something for the two of them? Please. Until she was 8, Tay had thought he was her older brother. He was as useless as one. Her father didn't even have the good sense to look ashamed. It wouldn't be the first time he hadn't done what Nona had asked him, and her grandmother was a fool on some other level if she thought it was the last. This notion that Tay that's put on her, that she has to think more, be more aware than her own father, and it's not even that her grandmother purposely puts it on her like that, but it just is.
Yes. It's like, and like what I loved about that whole dynamic as well too, is there's something about mothers and their sons and what they allow their sons to get away with and they wouldn't let their daughters get away with, or even their granddaughters.
Yes.
So like, especially the idea that like, especially Black men, like, oh, they've been through so much, we have to go easy on them and stuff like that. And I'm like, but doesn't that do we not go through things?
Correct. We'll figure it out, right? Like, is that's sort of what you're saying to us, is that we have to figure it out.
And it's that expectation that, girls are smarter than boys, which, I'm not going to.
Right. I mean, facts, but give us a break.
Yes. but there still should be some grace there, and there should be some, there should be some compassion for how much energy that we as children have to exert to mother our own fathers, our own parents, and stuff like that. So I think that's what was one of my, and that was so like, and even how you did it was so subtle, because you're now reading that back, and I read right over that.
and I think it's because it's happened so naturally, that we don't even pick it up. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. That's what it is. That's sort of almost the definition of being a Black girl, to be honest.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That subtle expectation that we will be able to contend with anything thrown at us.
Right. That's exactly it. That expectation that we are able to handle whatever it is because we're supposed to handle it. And if we don't handle it, like, then we're bad, or there's some guilt and there's shame then sent to us. Like,
yes.
Not only do we have to add on the pressure and the expectation, then we're adding another level of shame that's added to, and we're just existing. That's the thing. Like, it was just like, we're literally just existing. We're just breathing. Like, we come out and our first breath, we're like, well, you should know more than your dad.
Right. Didn't you already know how to do this? Why didn't you, know how to hold that bottle?
Right. Which, of course, I would love for children to just be able to do. Like, maybe that would inspire me a bit more to have some, be like, if they could just come out and be a bit more self-sufficient, I'd be down for that then. Yeah.
So, all right, we're going to wrap this up because we're not going to give everybody everything. My hope for this is really that that one day we can have a broader conversation about this, maybe with some other authors involved. At that time, maybe we'll have some book recommendations. I didn't have any other books to recommend because I really just wanted to springboard this conversation among those who follow us, among educators and librarians and parents who have girls or who interact with girls, which means that's all of us, right? We're either one or the other.
Right.
But I'm so glad that you agreed to talk to me, and I'm glad your words are out there, because Grown is yet another powerful book, and I think it's very necessary.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the invite. And I really do hope that we get to like continue this conversation, maybe bring more Black women into the fold, to really, because I feel like we all have a story to tell.
Yes,
I got
absolutely.
a story to tell.
They do. So y'all here, we calling for y'all. We're gonna, if you think that you would like to be a part of this conversation, get at us. We're gonna put a little proposal together. Look, you always gotta be ready, right? We always gotta prepare for that next big conversation.
Yes.
All right, Tiffany, thank you so much, and good luck with the book launch.
Thank you. You too. All right. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.